नमस्कार डॉक्टर भुवन लाल, इट्स ट्रूली अ प्लेजर टू हैव यू हियर टुडे। मैं बाकी सबका स्वागत करता हूं जो भी अभी तक इस श्रृंखला में हमारे साथ जुड़े हैं। और नेताजी समय के बड़े पाबंद थे और आज क्योंकि हम आज उनकी 126वीं वर्षगांठ पे उपलक्ष्य में सम्मिलित हुए हैं तो हम भी समय का पूरा ध्यान रखेंगे। बट मैं औपचारिक तरीके से आज सबका स्वागत करता हूँ केंद्रीय सचिवालय पुस्तकालय और सिटी बुक लीडर्स द्वारा आयोजित इस मासिक श्रृंखला लेखक से परिचय में आप सबका बहुत बहुत स्वागत है, अभिनंदन है। और जैसा कि मैंने कहा, आज हम नेताजी सुभाष चंद्र बोस जी के 126वें वर्षगांठ के उपलक्ष्य में मिल रहे हैं। और ये हमारा सौभाग्य है कि हमारे साथ डॉक्टर भुवन लाल जुड़े हैं, जिनका परिचय मैं अब एक फॉर्मल तरीके से आप सबसे कराना चाहूंगा। हमारे साथ कुछ बड़े विशिष्ट अतिथि भी जुड़े हुए हैं आज, जो नेताजी की विचारों से सहमत रहे हैं और उन्होंने उन विचारों को हमेशा आगे रखा है। आज डॉक्टर भुवन लाल के इस लेक्चर में वो कुछ ऐसी बातें कहेंगे जो उन्होंने अपनी इस बहुत ही मैं कहूँगा इट्स ब्यूटीफुल अमेजिंग बुक द मैन इंडिया मिस द मोस्ट, इस किताब के विषय में वो आज जो लेक्चर हमें देंगे और जिसमें वो हमें वो बातें बताएंगे नेताजी के बारे में, वो मुझे लगता है श्रृंखला में जो कि हम अभी तक करते आ रहे हैं, जहां हमने टैगोर और गांधी और उसके बाद गांधी जी पे भी एक चर्चा करी, आज हम इस श्रृंखला को आगे बढ़ाते हुए इस लेक्चर का संपूर्ण लाभ उठा सकें। और क्योंकि आज हमारे साथ बहुत सारे स्कूल से बच्चे भी जुड़े हैं जो कि इस श्रृंखला से उन चीजों को जान सकें जब वो अपने स्कूल में होते हैं, और कई चीजें सिर्फ निबंध लिखने के लिए 10 मार्क के या 15 मार्क के निबंध के बस रह जाता है। और जब हम बड़े होते हैं और कई लोग हम में से हिस्ट्री का सब्जेक्ट लेते हैं तो वो पूरा एक सब्जेक्ट बन जाता है जो कि मॉडर्न हिस्ट्री या वर्ल्ड वॉर 2 के नाम पे आता है। बट आज क्योंकि हमारे साथ एक ऐसे रिसर्चर जुड़े हैं जो कि ना सिर्फ इसको अपने लिए एक प्रोफेशन मानते हैं, लेकिन ये उनका पैशन है, इट्स हिज पैशन प्रोजेक्ट। और मैं आपको फॉर्मली उनसे इंट्रोड्यूस कराता हूँ। मैं उनकी किताब का ही सहायता लूंगा आपको उनका परिचय कराने में। डॉक्टर भुवन लाल इज एन अवार्ड विनिंग फिल्म मेकर, इंटरनेशनल जर्नलिस्ट एंड क्रिएटिव एंटरप्रेन्योर। ये जो किताब जिस पे आज हम चर्चा करने जा रहे हैं, ये आज इनकी पहली किताब है। इसके अलावा सर ने रिसर्च 2 किताबें और लिखी हैं जिनके बारे में वो अभी हमसे साझा करेंगे जब अपने इस लेक्चर में। और अब ज्यादा वक्त ना जाहिर करते हुए मैं इस मंच पर स्वागत करूंगा डॉक्टर भुवन लाल का। सर, वी रिक्वेस्ट यू टू एनलाइटन अस विद द लाइफ ऑफ नन अदर देन द मैन इंडिया मिस द मोस्ट, दैट सुभाष चंद्र बोस, नेताजी, एंड अ हैप्पी बर्थडे, शुभ जन्मदिनम तुभ्यम नेताजी।
थैंक यू मोहित जी, थैंक यू, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया। आज से 125 साल पहले भारत में नेताजी का जन्म हुआ था। आज 125 साल बाद और आजादी के 75 साल बाद हमारा देश नेताजी को याद कर रहा है। इतना वक्त लग गया हमको समझने में, इतना समय गुजर गया, इतने साल गुजर गए उस व्यक्ति को समझने में जिसने हमें आजादी दिलाई। मैं शुक्रगुजार हूं मोहित जी का, सेंट्रल सेक्रेटरीट लाइब्रेरी का, मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ कल्चर का, कि उन्होंने आज मुझे यहां पर बुलाया। पिछले 25 साल से तो मैं नेताजी की कहानी दुनिया भर में सुना रहा हूं और ढूंढ रहा हूं। भारत का अनकहा इतिहास मेरे जीवन की प्रेरणा है। नेताजी ने जो कुछ अपने जीवन में किया वो मेरे को हर रोज, हर दिन, हर मिनट, हर क्षण प्रोत्साहित करता है आज भी। दिस स्टोरी begins on 18th September 1857. So we will go back in time. Red Fort, Delhi, 1857. The British forces are standing outside. They're trying to enter the Red Fort. They breached the wall at Kashmiri Gate. Suddenly there is a solar eclipse. The skies go dark. It's not an ordinary solar eclipse. This solar eclipse is signifying the end of Mughal Sultanate. It is an eclipse of an empire. Finally, the British forces entered Red Fort on 20th of September. And on 21st September, at 4 o'clock in the morning, from the ramparts of Red Fort, 101 guns boomed. It was the royal salute of the British forces. And each of that gun and each of that firing told the citizens of this country, you are going to be ruled by the British government from now onwards. Queen Victoria, out of London, Buckingham Palace, will be ruling India. She didn't live in Buckingham Palace at that time. It wasn't built, but out of London will be ruling India from now onwards. We became a slave nation. The atrocities that were perpetuated by the British rulers on India between 1857 and 1907 are so dramatic and so upsetting that they have not been properly recorded even now. Even the idea of making India free could not be thought of. They came with such a force that no Indian could think of himself as an independent person. Bahadur Shah Zafar was dispatched to Rangoon, where he died inconsequentially. More importantly, the Union Jack, the British flag, was fluttering on the Red Fort. It took a while. Indians started talking about the imposition of foreign rule on us. The partition of Bengal in 1905 created an atmosphere of protests. And in that period in London, at the India House, Shyamji Krishna Verma inspired India with a magazine called India Sociologist. A lot of youngsters who had gone to England to study, among them Virendranath Chattopadhyay, Veer Savarkar, and Lala Hardayal, were inspired by this. They thought of reviving the Ghadar of 1857. They called it the First War of Independence. Eventually, Britain went to war with Germany in the First World War. And around that time, a person from Delhi, from Chirakhana, Nayi Sadak, Lala Hardayal, one of the brightest men born in the country, was at Stanford, and he started the Ghadar movement. The objective was to send an army to India and liberate the country and remove the Union Jack from Red Fort and replace it with an Indian flag. He went from America, Stanford, California, to Germany. He met the prisoners of war. He sang a song before them to tell them that they belong to a great nation. Sare jahan se acha Hindustan hamara. The First World War ended in Germany's defeat. The efforts of the Ghadar party were lost. Jallianwala Bagh happened. Michael O'Dwyer, who had ordered General Dyer to fire at the Indians, considered Hardayal as the single biggest problem the British Empire had encountered. In 1911, the British had decided to move the capital from Calcutta to Delhi. A dramatic incident had taken place at that time. On 23rd December 1912, as Lord Hardinge entered Delhi, his first day, first hour of arrival in the new capital of Delhi, in the heart of Chandni Chowk, in front of the Red Fort, with the flag fluttering at the other end. As he made his entry into Delhi, there was a bomb thrown at him. This assassination attempt on the highest possible dignitary of the British Empire was the first of its kind. But the end of First World War, Jallianwala Bagh, ended all that effort. The Ghadar Party movement scattered all over the world. In 1921, there was a man studying in Cambridge University, a very bright Indian, who decided to take the Indian Civil Service examination. Indian Civil Service was a heaven-born service, very difficult to qualify. But once you qualified, you became part of a regime and a group that had luxury thrown at them. Besides the power, besides access to various things, it was a very high-profile job. And this man, Subhas Chandra Bose, qualified for that. Not only qualified, he stood fourth in the global examination. But Subhas Chandra Bose was a patriot. He didn't want to serve the British Empire. He became the first and the only Indian in the history of the Indian Civil Service to have walked away from that job after qualifying. He resigned. He came to India and he became part of the freedom movement. This was a period when there were revolutionary movements happening simultaneously to the civil disobedience movement. Netaji was part of both. He was secretly helping the revolutionaries, and he was continuing in the Congress. He worked with C.R. Das. He became General Secretary of the Congress Party. He worked very closely with Mahatma Gandhi, Pandit Nehru, Sardar Patel. He did not think that the civil disobedience movement launched by the Congress Party would result in a success. He had other plans. He had lived in Europe. He had traveled there for health reasons. While he was in India, he was regularly jailed. But he knew what was happening in Europe. Slowly and steadily, as things happened, he was invited to become the president of the Congress Party. In 1938, Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose became the youngest president of the Congress Party. And after serving for a year, he wanted an extension for another year. At that stage, the leadership of the Congress Party decided not to give him an extension. They told him 1 year was enough. He felt he needed 1 more year to do what he wanted to do. Surprisingly, the people he thought who were with him backtracked. So he said, let's have an election. Nobody was willing to fight an election against Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose. He was such a popular man. He was, in fact, the most popular man in the country. The youth loved him. Eventually, Mahatma Gandhi got Mr. Sitaramaiah to fight the election against Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose. And he added that Sitaramaiah's defeat will be his defeat. So please vote for Sitaramaiah. The election took place and there was one winner. Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose. At that stage, when he had actually won the election for the president, the only election that took place in the Congress party. Politics came to the fore. Unethically, the entire Congress party leadership went against Netaji. The working committee resigned en masse, refusing to work with Netaji as the elected president, even though he was elected. Netaji walked away, resigned, and he said, I can't be the president of the Congress party if I can't have the support of the greatest Indian of our time, Mahatma Gandhi. And Mahatma Gandhi told him, and everybody else, Netaji is not the enemy of India. From that moment onwards, March 1939, Netaji knew where he had to go and what he had to accomplish. This was also the time when Hardayal died in Philadelphia. And if you look at historical perspective, that was the time, technically, the revolutionary movement, the Ghadar Party movement, the first war of independence, all of that behind him. Netaji was in the forefront and he took it forward. 6 months later in September, 4th of September 1939, the British announced a war against Nazi Germany. And they, without asking Indians, involved India in that war and started recruiting forcibly and voluntarily Indian soldiers to go and fight for the freedom of England in Europe. In that very difficult period, Netaji was jailed. While he was in jail, the Germans were marching into Paris. And he realized that he would probably spend the next few years in a British jail rather than doing something dramatic outside. So he planned. He planned an escape from that place. And on the night, first he moved to his house and lived in his house. On the night of 16th and 17th of January, dramatically, Subhas Chandra Bose disappeared from his house in Calcutta. The news of his disappearance came out many days later. By the time he had gone to Gomo, taken a train, traveled through Delhi, changed the train at the old Delhi railway station and reached Peshawar, all incognito, traveling in disguise as Muhammad Ziauddin from Jabalpur. Imagine a man as popular as an Indian film star going through the country incognito, without being recognized by anyone, and with the British police after him. And from Peshawar, he crossed to Afghanistan. A man in his mid-40s. January, winter, snow, on foot. British chasing him. He reached Jalalabad. From Jalalabad to Kabul, the treacherous highway, full of dacoits. Even now, very difficult to do. And in Kabul, he tried to approach the foreign consulates of Russia to try and get to Russia, to Moscow. They were not interested. The Russian consul thought he was an imposter, posing as Subhas Chandra Bose. He did manage to meet the German consul. He said, Herr Boss, you are being betrayed by your own countrymen. Be careful. Your life is in danger. Desperate times. Very little money. Life under threat. All alone. Netaji finally entered the Italian consulate and told the consular, look, I'm Subhas Chandra Bose, help me, I need to get to Europe. The consular said, Senior boss, you don't need to convince me that you are Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose. I know you. You don't remember me. When you came to Rome to meet Il Duce, it was I who took you around Rome as the diplomatic service officer. I will do whatever it takes to get you to Europe. Over the next 1 month, with the help of Italian intelligence and Italian passport, and then later on the German intelligence, Netaji reached Samarkand. And with Russian intelligence service, he was transported to Moscow in a train. In Moscow, the Germans took over and brought him to Berlin. When Netaji reached Germany, Europe was in the middle of war. And here was a man from India, thinking of liberating his country, living in Germany at that time. He was inconsequential to the Germans. The Nazis were racist. They had no interest in India. They actually thought the British were better to rule India than Indians themselves. I have gone through the meetings and the minutes of all the meetings that Netaji had with the German High Command. A lot of photographs have appeared in the press also. Those meetings were disasters. In one meeting, he was told India will not be free for 100 years. Do whatever you want to do. They had no interest. They had never met a man like Netaji. They decided to even make a feature film on his life. His dramatic escape was fascinating for them. But they had no interest in Indian freedom movement. Netaji had to be on one occasion mollified by the German diplomats because he got so angry in the meeting. Finally, when Germany attacked Russia, the idea of taking an army of Indian soldiers, the prisoners of war from British Indian Army who were in Germany as the Indian Legion into India through Afghanistan, that project died. Nothing could be done. He had reached a dead end. Around that time in India, suddenly they realized that this war was an opportunity and there was a chance of India's freedom. And the Congress High Command did exactly what Netaji had been asking them to do, to take advantage of Britain's weakness. And they launched the Quit India movement. But the British were very well prepared. They put everybody, the entire leadership, into jail, and it was over. The Quit India movement, in fact, failed to achieve its objective. Average Indians in India, with the entire leadership of Congress in jail, no hope for freedom, massive rationing due to Second World War, the economy in doldrums, military rule of the British Empire, were lost. They had no hope. At that time, Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose came on radio, Azad Hind Radio. And he told Indians, don't worry, I'm fighting for your freedom. India will be free. The sales of radios went up across the country. Special demands were made for radios that could hear the German frequencies so they could hear the voice of Netaji. Because when Netaji spoke, this country had hope. There was one man out there fighting for us. He was promising us freedom. Better days were ahead of us. But Netaji knew that he couldn't do much in Germany. He had reached a dead end. So a plan was made to send him to Japan. Because during that period, a dramatic movement had taken place. Singapore and Rangoon had fallen to the Japanese. The Japanese army was standing on the border of Burma and India. But how does one get from Europe in the middle of war to Japan? It was impossible. There was no land route. There was no air route, and the sea route had not been explored. Finally, it was decided to transport him in a submarine. But Netaji was not a naval officer. He had never been on a submarine. He had no training for naval activities. And it was the time of war. Submarines were targeted by the Allied forces. When the naval admirals came to meet Netaji to discuss the trip on the submarine, they told him, there are 97% chance that you will not make it. Will you go? He said, even if there was 1% chance for me to be able to make it, I will go all for India. Netaji was 5'9.5" in height. The height of the submarine was not enough. He couldn't stand straight for 3 months. He had to sleep on the same bed that was shared by others when he was not sleeping. There was German food. There was the fumes of the diesel engines. No walks in the park, no coffee breaks, just a submarine. Undersea, traveling from Europe to the Indian Ocean. And on top of it, the threat of Allied bombing. I have gone to Germany to see that submarine, similar submarine. Impossible to imagine how a man could live there. He did that journey, but it did not end there itself. When the German submarine reached Madagascar, and the transfer had to take place into the Japanese submarine. First of all, no human being before this had ever been transferred from Europe to Japan in a submarine in the history of the world. He was the first person. He and his colleague, Abid Hassan, were the two persons who were the first two people to ever do it in the history of the world. A submarine to submarine transfer, mid-ocean. For 3 days, the German and the Japanese submarine tried to communicate and get together and come side by side. It was impossible. The waves were too high. There were 30 feet for high waves. Finally, the German submarine captain told Netaji, we are turning back. I can't risk my men. The submarine will sink. We can't do this. It's over. We go back to Berlin. Netaji said, no. I will go to Tokyo. I haven't come this far. Stop and return. Let's do this. With great difficulty, the two submarines came next to each other. They were 30-foot high waves. Netaji was in a boat, being transferred from one submarine to another. The German naval film crew has actually photographed and filmed that period. And you can see how difficult it was. When Netaji's boat is in the water, he's totally wet. And the boat is slowly drifting towards the Japanese submarine. There are sharks in the water, all around. The Japanese naval team is shooting the sharks. In those circumstances, he made it to the Japanese submarine, along with his assistant, Abid Hassan. And finally, Netaji reached Tokyo. Tokyo was in the middle of Second World War. They had met many Indians before Netaji. They had no interest in Indians. Most Indians talked in English anyway. They were not Asian enough for the Japanese. The Japanese thought the Asians are the greatest people on earth. But the Indians, they like to live under British subjugation. Netaji did not get a meeting with anybody in Japan. The leader of Italy, Mussolini, had actually written a letter to Prime Minister Tojo in Japan. Please meet my friend, Subhas Chandra Bose. He's the revolutionary who will get India freedom. So finally, General Tojo, after keeping Netaji waiting in the Imperial Palace Hotel for 6 weeks, gave him a 5-minute appointment. Netaji had prepared for that meeting for the last 3 months and a half. He walked into the office of General Tojo and he started speaking. Nobody spoke like Netaji. There was nobody on earth like him. General Tojo was so impressed. That meeting got extended to 3 hours. He invited his entire cabinet to attend the meeting. The cabinet decided to bring in the entire military leadership of Japan to meet this man who had come all the way. They had never met anybody like him. They had no idea what they were dealing with. Everyone decided that Netaji should unanimously go and address the Japanese parliament. Japan was in the middle of war. They needed a man like Netaji to motivate the country. General Tojo accompanied Netaji in July 1943 to Singapore to restart the Indian National Army. The Indian National Army, formed by Subhas Bose, had died. A second attempt was made under General Bhosle, failed. Now, Netaji was the third attempt. Netaji went up there to speak to 60,000 Indians in Singapore. On his shoulders rested the future of India. He knew this is what is going to get India its freedom. Netaji had been told there is a lot of animosity against the Japanese. It's going to be very difficult to form an army out of the prisoners of war. And the prisoners of war, through the British spies, had been told, don't listen to this man. When he speaks, cover your ears, because when he says something, you will be transformed and you will lose respect for the king. And you will forget your oath. And that's exactly what happened. In 2 words, Netaji transformed the minds of everybody living in Southeast Asia. He said, Delhi chalo. And then he said the immortal words that inspire India in 2021, 75 years later after independence. Tum mujhe khoon do, main tumhe azadi dunga. Hundreds and thousands of Indians volunteered to be part of the Azad. 60,000 men got recruited. 30 crore rupees got collected. People gave away their entire wealth to Netaji. Here was a man who is going to get us our freedom. Netaji was one man who could unite people across the country. Prem Sehgal, captain of the British Indian Army, joined. Gurbakh Singh Dhillon, lieutenant in the British Indian Army, joined. Captain Shah Nawaz Khan, who had 45 members of his family in the British Indian Army, had huge respect for Netaji. He joined. Kadam kadam badhaye ja, khushi ka geet gaye ja. The army marched. A singular achievement of Netaji was that he put together a regiment of women warriors, Rani Jhansi Regiment, connecting the dots from 1857 to Azad Hind Fauj. On 26 September 1943, he was standing outside the grave of Bahadur Shah Zafar, 86 years after 1857. And he took a vow, we will march, we'll have a victory parade in front of Red Fort. The Battle of Kohima, the Battle of Imphal are considered the most difficult battles in the history of Second World War. It was the last real battle of the British Army and the British Empire, and the first battle for Indian freedom. The INA lost the battles in Kohima and Imphal, though they put up the Indian flag at Morang and then put up the flag at Andamans. They also lost the battle at Mount Popa. And then Hiroshima and Nagasaki ensured that the Japanese lost the war. But eventually, Netaji won our freedom right here in the city of Delhi at the Red Fort. After the war, the British decided to try the Indian National Army officers at the Red Fort trial as traitors who had betrayed the oath. And the Indian National Army returned to India and to Red Fort, not as victors, but as prisoners. By now, the leadership of the Congress party had been released from jail. The war in Europe and Japan was over. Britain needed India more than ever before. Pandit Nehru has recorded that wherever he went, people asked him about INA. Every villager in this country knew Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose because the censorship was over. The whole country was talking about Indian National Army and Azad Hind Fauj. It was an unbelievable thing. Mahatma Gandhi admitted he couldn't have ever imagined or ever accomplished what Netaji did by setting up this army of Indians. An unusual group of people. When they went to meet the Indian National Army prisoners at the Red Fort, they were amazed. The Hindus, the Muslims, the Sikhs, they were all together, eating from the same kitchen, fighting under one flag. Never before in the history of India had this happened. All being done by one man, Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose. Sardar Patel, who had opposed Netaji, suddenly turned around and he became a fan. He set up the I-Unit Fund. Bhola Bhai Desai, who had opposed Netaji in the Congress party, became the leading lawyer to fight for the freedom of the three men the British had chosen in the court of the INA. Shahnawaz Khan, Prem Sehgal, Gurbaksh Singh Tillat. Suddenly, three men representing three faiths of India, the whole country came together like never before in the history of Indian civilization. Everybody wanted those three men to be freed. Unbelievable situation. Muslim League, which was opposing Congress in everything, supported them. They were on the same side of fence as far as INA was concerned. Only the British Army generals wanted the three men dead. They had betrayed king and country. They had chosen between king or country, and they had chosen the country. The Japanese witnesses at the INA trial said independent India was the objective of INA. It was an independent army. Japanese had no control. It was led by Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose. Finally, the decision was taken inside the house of Claude Auchinleck, the commander-in-chief. Even though the courts decided that these three men had to be cashiered from the army, transported for life, sent to Andamans. There were protests all over the country. People wanted them free. But the British Army decided that they have to be sent off. An example has to be made of them. But Claude Auchinleck didn't agree with them. As the commander-in-chief of Indian Army, he knew what was happening in the country. The entire Indian armed forces were willing to revolt if anything happened to these three people. So they were released. Unconditionally released. Asked to march away from Red Fort. They didn't even know what to do when they came out of the jail. They had no idea. That moment, 1st of January 1946, the mighty British Empire that ruled the world, the single greatest empire in the history of human civilization, lost to one man, Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose. A naval mutiny took place. A military mutiny took place in Jabalpur. Now freedom was just a matter of months. The British decided to wind up and rush back to London. Every Britisher between here and London was rattled. They knew their life is under threat. They had no control over the British Indian Army or the civil service. Independence came at midnight on 15th of August. India was poorer by $43 trillion by then. All our jewels and our statues were in London. On 16th of August, the morning of the 16th of August at 9 a.m., 500,000 Indians were standing outside the Red Fort, the entire population of Delhi, to witness the unfurling of the Indian flag on the ramparts of Red Fort. It had taken 90 years to remove the Union Jack and put the Indian flag. Netaji's effort had won. The Indian National Army, led by Shahnawaz Khan, did its victory parade that day, that morning, 16th of August 1947, at Red Fort. Pandit Nehru gave credit to Netaji for having accomplished this. Later on, the realization fell on everyone in this country that the liberator of India was Subhas Chandra Bose. Not only was he the liberator of India, because the British used the armed forces to control their entire empire, the Indian armed forces, and they could no longer trust them. The loyalty factor was gone. The British Empire disappeared from planet Earth because of one man, Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose. 75 years later, when you walk to the India Gate and you see that statue on 15th August this year, remember this. It's taken us 75 years to recognize the fact that here was a man who sacrificed everything so that we could live our dreams. We could dream freely. We could vote. We could say whatever we wanted. We could appear in shows like this and participate and celebrate the life of the greatest Indian of the Indian freedom movement, Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose. Jai Hind to everybody. Thank you very much. You've given me this opportunity on the 125th birth anniversary of Netaji. And before I go, one last thing I want to do. It's in Hindi, but I will do it anyway. It's a small poem that's been written by a poet called Pradeep on the life of Netaji. Just a few lines, and you will realize who he was. जिंदा इनकलाब था, काम उसने वो किया, हिला दिया ब्रिटानिया, नर वो लाजवाब था। अपनी सदी का सबसे बड़ा चमत्कार था सुभाष, परदेशी हुकूमत का बहिष्कार था सुभाष, अपने गुलाम देश की ललकार था सुभाष, मां के चरण का पुष्प नमस्कार था सुभाष। उसने तो गजब किया, भाग ही पलट दिया, उसने देश को अंगारों पे चलना सिखाया, लोहे की दहकती हुई तलवार पे चलना सिखाया, उसने सिखाया बिजलियों के तार पे चलना, तलवार के सामने हो तो तलवार पे चलना। वो नर लाजवाब था, जिंदा इनकलाब था। जय हिंद। थैंक यू वेरी मच।
जय हिंद डॉक्टर भुवन लाल। आई थिंक ये जो वॉर क्राई आपने दी है जय हिंद दिल्ली चलो की, और जिस वेग के साथ आपने, जिस परिश्रम के साथ आपने इस किताब को लिखा है, उतने ही जोश के साथ आपने जो आज अपना एड्रेस दिया, आपका कीनोट एड्रेस, जिसे कहते हैं कि रगों में खून खौल गया आज। और जितने कमेंट्स अभी आ रहे हैं वो सारे इस बात पे आ रहे हैं कि कोफ्त से भरे हुए कई ऐसे कमेंट्स आ रहे हैं कि हमने हिस्ट्री को सही ढंग से क्यों नहीं पढ़ा, क्यों नहीं हम नेताजी को इतने सालों में एक बार भी उनको जानने की कोशिश करी, कई पिक्चर बनी उस पर। और मैं इसलिए मैंने पहले भी एक बार मैसेज डाला है, मैं आप सबको डालूंगा, अगर आप ये किताब ढंग से पढ़ें और अगर इसको और लोगों के साथ साझा करें, तो ये जो सच्चाई है इस देश की, जो हमारे इन महान नेताओं की सच्चाई है, जिसकी वजह से, जो डॉक्टर भुवन ने कहा, आज हम आजादी की सांस ले पा रहे हैं, आज हम जहां चाहते हैं वहां घूम आते हैं, हम जो चाहते हैं फेसबुक पे लिख देते हैं, हम जिसकी चाहे बुराई कर देते हैं, हम जिसकी चाहे अच्छाई कर देते हैं, लेकिन जो बड़ा क्रेडिट जाता है वो इनको जाता है। ना सिर्फ ये किताब नेताजी के पर्सपेक्टिव से, लेकिन अगर आप में से कोई हिस्ट्री के एंथुसियास्ट हैं, अगर आप वर्ल्ड वॉर 2 के बारे में जानना चाहते हैं, अगर आप जियो पॉलिटिक्स समझना चाहते हैं, अगर आप समझना चाहते हैं कि उस वक्त दुनिया के मानचित्र पे क्या चीजें हो रही थी, तो ये किताब बहुत ही अद्भुत तरीके से लिखी गई है। आपने डॉक्टर भुवन लाल के इस एड्रेस में उनकी डिटेलिंग सुनी होगी, जो कि मेरे मानने में, क्योंकि मैंने किताब के काफी अंश को बहुत बारीकी से पढ़ा है, इनके डिस्कोर्स में और इनकी किताब की डिटेलिंग में, एंड पार्डन मी फॉर दैट डॉक्टर लाल, but I must say it would be only 10% of what he has just mentioned. The book is so detailed that you will even find the color of the dress that or the uniform that Netaji was wearing, and also the other characters in that entire scene by scene he has mentioned. He has mentioned when he met Hitler, when he met Mussolini, when he was in Afghanistan, and especially this period, his entire great escape from Calcutta to Berlin is a story in itself. Those 7 pages, sir, I think they are mind boggling. That's the center chapter, but it also takes the center stage of your story. This is a book, I'm very passionate about it. It goes into my top 5 books on history that I can recommend to others. It's a remarkable book. And I'm glad Dr. Bhuvan and we've been planning to do this session for quite some time now, but what a great day to celebrate and do this discussion. And Dr. Lal, I'm thankful from the bottom of my heart. It's brilliant. There are so many questions that have come, but there's a very, very important question that has come, is about which is very common. You would have addressed it in many of your other discussions. There's a gentleman, he is asking, when Netaji knew that Hitler was not favorable towards the lives of Jews, while he met him, what was his intent, and also what was his perspective on the way the Jews were treated. Though you have also mentioned about the Russians at that point of time and the gulags and the world scenario around capitalistic, socialistic, as well as communist way, we would like to hear your views on this question.
Very important to know this, because a lot of people wonder, why would somebody go and meet the Nazis? Why do business with these guys? Now you have to see where the world was in 1941. Majority of the English-speaking world was ruled by the British Empire and Americans. They did not like Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose. They wanted him in jail. He was not going to get any help. Within India, the British army rule, the military dictatorship, was horrific. Anybody who's lived through that period will tell you how difficult it was for a day-to-day existence. For us, in fact, we had no knowledge of, as Indians, of what was happening in Germany with the Jews at that time. And we had no knowledge of what was happening to the locals under German control. We obviously knew what was happening to us because of the British. And for us, Churchill was far more hateful than Hitler. At least Hitler was hitting at Churchill. We had to deal with Churchill. We didn't have to deal with Hitler. Now, under those circumstances, there were very few places in geography where Netaji could go to. He could go to Russia, but the Russians were never interested in Netaji. They never, ever talked to him. They did not like him at all. He tried many, many times to get in touch with the Russians. They won't even read his letters. They never replied to him. So the only places where Japan was not in the war scenario at that time, it was difficult to get there. The only places were, it was very difficult to get to Europe also, but there were only 2 places. Italy, where he had met Mussolini before, and Mussolini had specifically asked him Are you going to go the violent way or the non-violent way? And Netaji said, I believe in violence. So he said, you are going to be successful. So he had a rapport with Mussolini. He had met some people in Nazi Germany at a very simple level, not at a high level. And he spoke German. He had lived in Germany for some time. So that became the place to go. Now the whole question of the Jews. I must tell you, I'm very proud, and we are all proud as Indians, to be a member of a civilization which Vivekananda talked about in Chicago. India is the only country on planet Earth where the Jewish people have never been persecuted. We still have a Jewish population in this country. We are great friends of Israel. Now, Netaji was part of this civilization. He was a follower of Vivekananda. What was he doing in Germany? He was trying to do the best possible for India. He was following what Bhagavad Gita has taught us. He was following what Krishna told Arjuna. Do what is necessary. The means don't mean anything. The end is everything. It was a choice between means and end, and he was doing the right thing for India. He made friends with the enemy of the enemy. That is classic Indian style of working. And that's what he did. That's what he did with Japanese. He had a Faustian pact with these Axis powers. Objective was India's freedom. As long as that was the objective, he was willing to talk to them. The moment that objective didn't happen, he walked away. He lived for only one idea, freedom of India.
I think pretty valid point, Dr. Bhuvan Lall, and that's why I'm again mentioning that don't look just Netaji as the character of this story. You should actually go beyond, look at the globe at that point of time, what was happening, and also the atrocities that were actually bought in Africa at that point of time by the Allied powers, and also what was happening in the name of capitalism. And exactly after 1857, when people from Lucknow who have also joined in and other patriots, you would realize they were on each and every tree there was a body that was hung. So you have to look it beyond from the perspective of what media wants to show you, and that's precisely why I will send the overall and the lengthy profile of Dr. Bhuvan Lall, which actually says that he's an educator. He's also a renowned movie maker, and his passion about writing this book is beyond his profession, I guess. And that's why this detailing is so important. So thank you for that brilliant answer, Dr. Bhuvan Lall, because this is one of the most important questions whenever we relate about Netaji, and everyone starts putting him into the same cadre as Hitler and others.
Mohitji, there has been a disinformation campaign against Netaji from 1940s onwards. He was called Tojo's dog. He was shown as a fascist. All this was done very specifically by a full department of the British government. It was headed by one of the finest writers of English language, George Orwell. Netaji was blackballed. He was painted out of everything, specifically because he was the single greatest threat to the British Empire, and he proved it.
So we have a class 10th student, Swarn, who has joined us, and he has a very, very important question. While I see there are seas of oceans of questions coming that this book should be part and this discussion should be part of the course. How about we have a question from Swarn, who's a class 10th student, to ask this question directly to you.
Morning, sir. I am Swarn Srivastava from student of class 10, sir. Sir, I want to know that, sir, as a student, the part told by you at last, sir, that how we got independence was a very major part, but has, sir, no any relevance in our course book, test book. Instead, we only read about sir, Satyagraha movements are done by other socialists like Gandhiji's and all that, sir. But sir, the part introduced by you, sir, was most important part, and I don't know anything except I have seen the movies on Subhas Chandra Bose, sir. And sir, same question like this, sir. So sir, can I say that Subhas Chandra Bose was the only person behind the independence of our country?
It's an important question. Thank you, sir. And it's important. We have to realize that the Indian freedom movement was a multi-layered movement. Our historians have done grave injustice to us, was giving us by one side of the picture that there was ahimsa and satyagraha, and that got us our freedom. That is complete nonsense. The truth is that there were revolutionaries involved. There was the Ghadar Party movement written out, painted out. There was Azad Hind Fauj. The INA trials are the central event. On this show today, Mohit, we had Mr. Ramanathan, former Secretary to Government of India, IAS 1952 batch, 94 years old. His father actually was involved in the INA movement as the recorder of the INA trials at Red Fort. These things have been written out of our books. Netaji's efforts and the sacrifices of the INA soldiers are key to Indian freedom movement. There we have Mr. Ramanathan. Namaskar, uncle. Vanakkam.
Vanakkam, Ramanathan, sir. It's truly a pleasure and a privilege to have you here for this discussion. While sir mentioned, I thought if you would like to say a few words, it would be an honor, honestly.
Yeah, I'm very, very grateful that my dear friend and my service colleague, school colleague, college colleague, and service colleague, that is Bhuvan's father. We were in the same college from 1943 to 47 in the College of Commerce, and later on in the Civil College from 47 to 49, and we joined the civil service together in 1952. It's a great honor and privilege for me to greet Bhuvan today, who has blossomed into a great writer, entrepreneur, filmmaker, and he has become almost a celebrity in his own right. And it's a great pleasure, therefore, when he sent me this message to me, I was extremely delighted to be ensured that I should be present here today, in spite of age and other health issues, that I should listen to him. So thank you, Bhuvan. Thank you to Central Secretariat Library leaders, and also my friend, Bhuvan's relative, and my good friend Vikram Dish also there on the screen. See? And host Vikram Dish stays in, of course, in Bangalore itself, so often he meets me. So, sir, please go ahead. I'm listening very intently. Once again, my hearty congratulations to Bhuvan. And I have a feeling that sooner or later, he is also going to be awarded the Padma Bhushan, I think.
Jai Hind, sir. Jai Hind, uncle. Jai Hind. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure. We have got many comments, Dr. Lall, on why is it so that we are not making such stories a part of our curriculum. I have a request to everyone who has joined in today. It's not about the change in the curriculum, because the students will still, and the children will still be bound by aping the science and mathematics. History will always be boring for them, because that doesn't take them to the real system of capitalistic jobs. So it's our responsibility to take such discussions, talks, and books to those children and inspire them into this journey. I'm very thankful to Central Secretariat Library. While we have many other questions today, Dr. Lall, with your due permission, we are extending it for 5-6 more minutes today. So we will take few more questions, though many of them are connected. They're part of your talk. As someone requested, one of my dear friends who's here, and he usually calls me in my corporate side of work as a PPT man. He says that nothing goes with you, Mohit, without showing a PPT. And you would recall, Dr. Lall, I was also requesting you. So I thought I will quickly show a small PPT of the pictures that you just mentioned that were actually documented by the Germans while this submarine transfer happened. This is what I was able to find with a reference from your book as well, and also on internet. Some quick pictures that are being taken.
That's him on the board before that. That's the transfer.
Yeah.
This is when he got to come out in the Atlantic on the way out of Germany.
Correct.
Near Africa, West Africa.
And while I was searching it, Dr. Lall, there's so many amazing stories related to these pictures. And I'm so glad.
This is the transfer taking place. So you can imagine how difficult it is.
Yeah. And then with the German sailor, the captain.
No, this is the captain. This is the
This
captain.
is the captain. Correct.
Yeah, he actually
Correct.
died in the Second World War. I mentioned that in my book. The submarine eventually was sunk.
So this is a story, as you have also mentioned, known as the U-boat submarine.
Yes. U-boat.
Yeah, very interesting one. And also, this is something which has recently popped up to celebrate his birthday, of
Correct.
what Dr. Lall just mentioned. Imagine in a time when the train journey was so difficult, and also he traveled across the terrain with the snow and deserts. This is a remarkable journey, and
And his life was under threat.
Yes, big time, big time. So I think I thought I'll quickly share it with everyone. A lot of questions also came. If we can show some pictures. I think now I would request Shri Manoj Dehuri ji from Central Secretariat Library, our director from the Central Secretariat Library, to give his vote of thanks and also to say an address in terms of how this Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav can be celebrated more with these books and remarkable talks by people like you, Dr. Lall. Shri Manoj Dehuri ji, aapka swagat hai. Over to you, please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to all. I, on behalf of Government of India, Ministry of Culture and Central Secretariat Library, thank Dr. Bhuvan Lall ji for his very graphic, as Mohit had said, that we are living through as if we were living through that age. That is what I gathered from your discourse. And yes, that was a very graphic details you have discussed online. And I thank City Book Lovers who bring us such authors and personalities monthly basis, and it is a very inspiring things for it's inspiring initiative for the Central Secretariat Library to get our viewers and subscribers to know such great personalities and their work and their hard work. And of course, the inspiration is always there for our subscribers. And as Mohit said, Dr. Bhuvan, he's a multifaceted personality, and this should be an inspiration to youngsters that who can see you can focus on lots of things if you have the intention, like you are a filmmaker, an author, historian, and also connected with the entertainment industry. So, and the media, obviously. So I think all the subscribers and the people who are into it, they should take inspiration that you can do if you have the intention to do and you have the inclination to do something. So you can be part of a lot of activities at a stretch. As far as actually, one thing I wanted to say might be a little bit, this is my personal view, that I think Mr. Bose was not missed, as you have the title says, comparatively. Yes, missed comparatively, relatively, but not missed. And after, as you said, after 75 years, we are installing a statue at the ramparts of the India Gate. Yes, so he was not missed. And I think that today also we are celebrating Parakram Divas, and now the 26 January celebration start from today. So the Indian people at large, or the government of India, has not missed out. It might be comparatively not missed out. So it is a very appropriate, the City Book Lovers, this discourse on his birthday today on Parakram Divas, and we are glad to have your very inspiring discourse from your side. As far as, yes, Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav is concerned, actually there are too many things going on at too many places. All the ministries are involved, even in the foreign, the foreign embassies are also involved. Yes, we can have more such interesting discourses on the freedom movement, And freedom movement is a very large subject. As that young fellow, the 10th standard, he was saying that there is no such focus on Subhas Chandra Bose. I don't think so. I did my 10th in 84. I think we had a chapter on freedom struggle altogether. And yes, they touch everything. I know Indian National Army. From that only we know, obviously. So giving focus to one personality will be a very vast subject or a vast syllabus or a curriculum for a young student in 10th standard. I think the course is very fair enough for, I think, everybody at that level to understand freedom struggle, because freedom struggle is a very vast thing, and there are lots of heroes, unsung heroes that have not been talked about. And these are like the stalwarts or the heroes like Subhas Chandra Bose, Gandhiji, and all those. They are talked about and they are written about, but there are lots of unsung heroes that has been left out somehow, somewhere. So yes, Culture Ministry is I think the nodal ministry of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, and is doing its best. And I'm very thankful to Dr. Bhuvan again for his very interesting discourse, and such thing really what you call to go through a history. And Mohit for getting such personalities on monthly basis on Sundays, making, as I said earlier, also making our Sundays very interesting. And I again welcome Dr. Bhuvan to please give us another discourse sometime later. Thank you very much. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Manojji. Jai Hind. And from our side of City Book Leaders, in our pursuit to spread this joy of reading, we are sending many of these copies to some of the school students across parts of various students who have joined in today through ACE Innovation and other storytelling organizations who are part of our community. Desh seva se badi koi seva nahi, sir. So we are honored to be part of this curation exercise with Ministry of Culture. And I'm thankful to everyone at Ministry of Culture, Central Secretariat Library, including Raoji, Negiji, Bishji, Rajeshji, and Rakeshji, and everyone. It's truly a privilege and an honor to be of this service on a Sunday. Isse behtar aur kya hoga. And thanks to you, Dr. Bhuvan Lall. And we know your next research is on Sardar Patel. And we would be very, very glad to know yet again about the real Iron Man of the country. Because आज़ादी 1947 के बाद भी हमारे देश में कहीं यूनियन जैक लहराया जाता था. हमारे देश में हम देश में होके भी आज़ाद नहीं थे. और इसलिए सरदार पटेल की बात करना बहुत जरूरी है. And we will have you very soon back to this platform to talk about Sardar Patel. And it would be our pleasure, sir, yet again. बहुत बहुत आभार. जय हिंद सर. जाने से पहले आपका कोई संदेश जिन लोगों ने आज ट्यून इन किया.
I have said what I had to, but I must tell you that Netaji is our inspiration. He is an ideal Indian. We should all aspire to do our bit for our nation and make India the world power he dreamt India would be after independence. Jai Hind. Jai Hind to everybody. Thank you.
Jai Hind, sir. Namaskar. Dhanyawad.